Thanks for joining us again. Me and Jared back for another episode. This week is actually a listener sort of request. Luke on our Instagram account has put up a film called VFW from 2019. Before we get to that though, Jared, let's do a little bit of around the grounds, mate. What have you been watching? I know we've recorded recently, so it's probably not that big, but what have you caught up with?
Yeah, only a smaller time between recording, so there's not a whole lot. But I watched E.T. I watched E.T. with the kids. Yeah, it still gets me. Absolutely love it. I watched Society. It popped up on Amazon Prime, and I'd never seen it, so I checked that one out. Interesting. I didn't mind it.
Yeah, that's got some weird shit in it, hasn't it?
Yeah, look, it gets very strange down the stretch. Anyone that's seen it will probably know what I'm talking about. Yeah, I didn't mind it. I didn't mind it prior to that, but yeah, just it gets a little bit strange. It gets a little bit strange with some of the things that are happening down the stretch. I caught up on. I'm starting to finish off Gotham. I hadn't watched it in quite some time, so I jumped onto the 4th season to head into the 5th season and knock that over. Still pretty.
And how is it?
Still pretty crazy.
On return,
it's a little bit out there. You know, when you do things like Batman and things like that, I think one of the things that I do like to see is different people's takes on the material and the characters. And Gotham certainly goes its own direction with a few of the characters, so I enjoy some of them. A couple of them are just real stinkers. I thought they just absolutely butchered a few of the characters, but the show itself, I don't mind it, so looking forward to sort of finishing that.
Is Batman in it at all?
Yeah, Bruce Wayne's in it, and towards the end he starts to kind of head to that place, which I would have preferred to not be in it. Initially, it was initially I was envisioning something like the Gotham Central comics that are like the GCPD without Batman around. He's just kind of on the periphery.
Yeah.
But it went another direction. It sort of gave quite hefty roles to Bruce Wayne and Alfred, which I didn't mind so much because the guy that plays Alfred is pretty good. I liked his sort of take on things, but yeah, I don't know. I felt that.
Have you had any dealings with the? Sorry, mate. Have you had any dealings with the new Alfred show that they put out?
Yeah, so I started.
I think it's called Pennyworth or something.
I started to watch it. I started to watch the pilot, and I thought to myself, "Look, if I'm going to invest time in this one, maybe I should just go and knock Gotham over and then move on to this," because I believe it's made by the same people. There's a few of the same people involved. From my understanding is that it's not related to Gotham, the show. It's its own thing, but with some of the same people being involved, I saw a few of the names and thought, shit, I still haven't finished Gotham, so I better just knock those 2 seasons over, and then I'm free and clear for all this other stuff to get into.
Yeah, but
yeah, I haven't heard a whole lot about it. I've sort of purposely avoided it, so it'll be interesting to see what it's like, but I don't know how far you can go with that sort of stuff.
Yep. What else did you have?
The other one I watched, actually I had 2 more. I watched Free Solo, which I'd never seen. I'd been meaning to watch. It's on Disney Plus, so I jumped on that and checked it out. It's bloody good, actually. Like, those guys are just crazy. Like it's one of those things where I'll just be looking at it going, nah. If there's that high a risk,
I'd be doing that.
You could die. It's just not for me.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, they go into that. The guy's obviously got. He's very different. He processes and thinks about things differently, clearly. And they have a scene where he's essentially getting an MRI scan, and they said, what is it, the amygdala or whatever they call it? They basically said yours just doesn't light up to where normal people would get excited about things. Yours just doesn't even fucking register. So you need sort of a higher level of things that are gonna stimulate you, basically. Which kind of
so that's why he does what he does.
Yeah. But seeing him actually do the climbing is pretty fucking breathtaking. So yeah, I would check that out if you haven't seen it. And the last one I watched was I got around to Black Christmas finally, the new one.
Right.
It was interesting in the way that it approached things. Like, it's definitely like a Me Too slasher. And I thought a couple of the ideas in there were actually quite good. And I thought the lead character was sort of quite believable in the way that she was approaching certain things. It probably missed the mark a little bit going the PG-13 route. Although I did kind of read an interview with the director that kind of justified why she did that, and I can understand why she did it, but I felt it wasn't all that successful, because she was saying as a woman she was kind of trying to avoid the gore factor and to kind of ramp up the chills and the tension, which I completely understand, but I felt that it didn't do that very well. Like, there wasn't a lot of tension and there wasn't a lot of kind of scares that way. No. And, down the stretch things get a little bit off track, but I sort of appreciated that it was something that actually tried to have something to say, because sometimes you'll get a slasher that just doesn't have a lot to say, and when you kind of see it over and over, you do sort of appreciate someone actually using the medium to sort of throw something out there, which I thought was worthwhile. So I didn't mind it.
Yeah, look, I would agree with you that the effort and the attempt to do something different with the slasher was good to see. The problem for me was exactly what you just said. It was not a good slasher film. Yeah. The slasher elements were very average, like very. And I totally agree. I'm a big fan of Imogen Poots, and I thought she was really, really good. And her character, as you say, the whole idea of sexual assault and all that type of stuff, was I felt worthy of being looked at, and being explored. But the genericness of the slasher elements, the ending, which I understood was kind of like, was meant to be like subtext and all that type of stuff, but it was just ham-fisted. And I mean, it's probably worth me looking back on it again, having another look. But I agree with you, a little bit more gore wouldn't have gone astray, and I don't really see why you couldn't have at least put some in there. You didn't have to go overboard and have everybody murdered in awful ways. Yeah. But you could have had it in there at least once. Yeah. To try and show us
I am totally fine with a movie if you choose not to go the gore route. I mean, to be quite frank, in particular movies, I kind of detest it when they go for the gore without any of the chills. So I've got no problem with them going the other way. What my favourite of the classic slashers is Halloween, and it's probably the most bloodless of all of them. But if you're going to do that, you got to get the scares right, and the sort of scenes where the killer is sort of stalking around are just, they're not very good.
Yeah, they're just kind of flat.
Yeah, and the ending was, the ending's been a little bit controversial. I'm not going to spoil anything, but I feel like when it was going on, I was like, okay, I get what they're trying to say here. I understand what they're saying, and the message they're putting out, which is kind of cool. But I think how it was going to play in as part of the movie kind of got lost in the subtext a little bit. That was probably my biggest thing about the ending.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And look, I look at that, and I look at the new Halloween, which I felt sort of was also a Me Too inspired slasher, and the new Halloween is 10 times the movie that
I would take that every day of the week. But so
I think it's doable. I mean, Halloween kind of backed off a little bit. Like it didn't take it quite as far in the direction that Black Christmas did. So there's a little bit of apples and oranges there. But I think Halloween handled it pretty well in the confines of a slasher film.
Yeah, and I think the scenes were much scarier in Halloween. But I feel like Black Christmas has got a bit of a bad rap because some people just absolutely tore it to pieces. And I think perhaps that was why I was more positive towards it when I watched it. I was thinking, it's not that bad. But I feel like if you've heard it's absolutely dreadful and you're steering clear because of that, maybe check it out, because I don't think it's as bad as some people have made it out to be.
I think any self-respecting horror fan should have a look at it just to see what they were trying to do.
Yeah, for sure.
Even if it's unsuccessful, which I felt it was, it doesn't take away from the fact that at least they were trying to push a little bit.
Yeah, well, it's another in the
perhaps
Blumhouse
kind of-
sort of stable of we don't make it unless there's what we consider to be an interesting idea behind it. You can see where that was present.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. So appreciate what they tried to do, but yeah, on the level of a slasher film, it didn't work.
yeah, it missed a few marks there.
Not certainly for me.
Yep.
Yeah, anything else, mate?
That was it for me.
I was very lean. I finished off City on a Hill.
Ah, yes.
Kevin Bacon again. Just I don't need to say it, but yeah, he sizzles. Look, it was quite enjoyable. A little bit convoluted, and I wouldn't call it excitement plus. There's not like action packed things happening every 5 minutes, but it's a nice little sort of drama thriller, and Bacon is a really good sort of foil and plays kind of a smarmy sort of bad guy. Well, not bad guy, but a kind of like a guy with loose morals. And it's worth checking out for him alone, I reckon.
Right.
And the only other thing I watched was, and I believe you watched as well, was the Dark Side of the Ring episode that just dropped.
Oh, yes, I did, actually.
About the Brawl for All.
Yeah.
Holy shit. What was going on in the WWF back then?
As I said to you, mate, at the time when the Brawl for All was on, I was watching weekly. I was obsessed with wrestling again at that time. It was sort of it had come back into my life in a sense, and I was lucky enough to see plenty of the Brawl for All as it was happening. But fuck, it just crazy.
Feels like, to me, and I was not a massive wrestling guy. I was more of a 80s and 90s wrestling, early 90s, late 80s wrestling guy. You know, the Hulk Hogan's and the Jake the Snakes and those guys, but fell out of it after that. But just watching that just makes me wonder, what were they thinking? I mean, they had a built-in audience to what they were doing. Wrestling, the storylines, everyone knew it was choreographed, and the storylines were kind of, it was kind of theatre.
Yeah. But the funny thing is that they on the episode, it goes into it briefly, but obviously the Attitude Era where The Rock and Stone Cold and those guys were dominating it, that came after a pretty rough patch in the 90s, and they show some of that, which was one of the funniest parts when they roll out that bloody Mantor.
You couldn't get in the ring.
Yeah. But I think if my memory serves me, at the time that the Brawl for All was going on, wrestling was back. At the time that it was happening, The Rock and Stone Cold and that had already started that upward trajectory again. So this was kind of it was fucking weird. But yeah, the episode is
it was kind of
typically good. I think it's a really good series.
Yeah.
On the back of something as serious as like the Chris Benoit stuff, it doesn't hold up to things like that, but it is a really fun thing to have a look at in depth.
Yeah. But it just seems weird that they tried to sort of go with what you would call like a mixture of boxing and, I mean, it wasn't even MMA. Like, you can't actually call not trying to do MMA. I mean, quite frankly, I couldn't stop laughing at these supposed takedowns as they dive at blokes' legs wearing their boxing gloves. They look like the Mummy. Like, it was just... And the boxing was just a shambles. They were just swinging haymakers and hoping that they might connect.
Yeah.
A couple of blokes got absolutely tagged too.
Yeah. Bart Gunn certainly put a couple of people's he put his fist through a couple of people's faces.
I felt for him because he got screwed.
Yeah, he did. Yeah.
They were saying that, we'd give him a shot. But they basically just blackballed him because he wasn't the guy that they wanted.
Yeah.
Which is an absolutely ridiculous concept considering you put this together where it was basically a free-for-all.
Yeah, you put it together knowing...
You couldn't work out who was going to win.
Yeah. I mean, as they said, the guy that they were expecting to win had years of kind of high-level football and wrestling under his belt, but he was 38 at the time, coming off injuries.
Didn't he pull a hammy?
Yeah, he did a hammy just before he got knocked senseless. Poor bastard. That finished his career, essentially. Because as they say in the doco, they were shaping him up for a run with Stone Cold Steve Austin. He jumps into the Brawl for All, gets knocked out, and then he was fucking... After he came back from injury, he was barely relevant and then disappeared after a couple of years. I believe he's actually passed on now too, so he's...
I mean, look, it's a cutthroat business. That's one thing this show has sort of reiterated.
Yeah.
It's a very cutthroat business.
Yep.
And there's not a lot of, unless you're a guy like The Rock who basically hits the scene, or a Stone Cold, and basically makes a splash, you don't tend to hang around.
Yeah.
It's short-term stuff, and it's hard not to feel for a couple of the players in that episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
Basically where it all ended up.
Yep.
So very, very enjoyable series though. Definitely worth watching if anyone's interested in it. All right, that was me. Let's take a break, Jared, and watch the trailer for VFW.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, there you go.
You've been at this, haven't you?
I have.
Uh-huh.
2 of us. Still here.
Still here. You know where you are, kid?
In the VFW post. How about we close the bar down early tonight?
What do you got going on?
The best birthday that Freddie ever got.
Hey, this is girl.
It's Q&A time, kid. See, the problem is that me and my old friends are probably going to die tonight unless you help us out to understand what's happening here. You steal this?
Boz killed my sister, all right? This, though, it's all he's got his whole life.
VFW. What is that?
Veterans of Foreign Wars.
Good. Soldiers are good at dying. There's only one satisfactory solution, and that is we get our product back, and each of you die.
You were a soldier. So are we all. Let's act like it. We set a perimeter. We make our stand.
You'll all die very, very slowly. You last.
But whatever you're gonna do, do it. Because you make a mistake, I'm gonna cut your heart out.
You and me both know this ain't the only option. We can push Miss Teen USA right back out to the way she came in.
It's for you that we're doing all of this.
I never asked for your goddamn help, Gramps.
The second you walked through that door, we was duty-bound to help you.
Let's go. Anybody else want to come in my bar?
VFW from 2019, directed by Joe Begos, who directed Bliss. I hope I've pronounced his name properly. I'm not 100% sure, but written by Max Bralia and Matthew McCardle. It's produced by Josh Either, who produced Almost Human, Amanda Presmick, who produced Dragged Across Concrete, and Dallas Sonia, who produced Bone Tomahawk, which is a very good film. It stars Stephen Lang as Fred Paris, William Sadler as Walter Reed, Fred Williamson as Abe Hawkins, and Martin Cove as Lou Clayton. I couldn't find a budget for it. I'm assuming it's fairly low, and it must have only been released in limited release, because the box office I have here is 23,000 worldwide, so must have had a short run in some festivals and things like that. Now, if you look closely at the theatre, there's a poster for a techno horror film that I briefly flirted with when we did. What was that technological horror film I had us watch? I can't even remember.
Ghost in the Machine.
Oh, Ghost in the Machine. No, this one was called for Brain Scared. I don't know if you ever remember Brain Scared.
Yeah,
with the Trickster.
I don't remember seeing it, but I am familiar with the Trickster for some reason.
Yes, and he was kind of like a cut-rate Freddy Krueger.
yeah.
You're probably lucky I ducked that one for Ghost in the Machine.
No, I'd rather watch Brain Scared.
No, you wouldn't.
Yeah, I'm still up for it.
All right, stuff it in. Brain Scared next week. I think it's on iTunes.
Is it?
Maybe.
Yeah. I mean,
did that one have Eddie Furlong in it?
Yeah, I think it did.
His career hit the shit.
Yeah, but I think that was that was another one along the lines of what was his name, Horace Pinker or whatever, that was supposed to be the next Freddy Krueger. The trickster was going to be the next Freddy Krueger.
Shocker! The name of a movie has never been so apt.
Oh dear.
That movie, I was never a fan of that. Look, I suggest, Jared, I'm putting it right out here, we need to do a rewatch of Shocker.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I haven't seen it since '89 or whatever when it actually came out.
Are you sure? Because I watched it. It must have been early 2000s, and I watched it.
No, I watched it once. Wiped it from my memory.
So I'm thinking I must have watched it with someone, and you're usually suspect number one. Something like that.
Immediately springs to mind. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. When I say I watched, when I say to myself, some idiot made me watch Shocker, usually that idiot is you. So. And idiot number two
I
was
wiped that
me.
thing like a dirty ass in '89.
Yeah, well, in '89 you could wipe your ass, so now you can't get enough toilet paper to do that. The good old days of 1989, when you had no concerns about whether you're going to be able to wipe your backside or not. The easier times.
Yeah, they were good times. Sorry, we're off the topic here. All right, I will give you my thoughts on VFW. I really enjoyed it, and in fact, it kind of was like a gloriously over-the-top, gory sort of riff on Assault on Precinct 13, which I love. I always love that type of film where, you know, you barricade yourself in and you're trapped, and, you know, there's a small group. You've got limited weapons. I love that. It always works for me, and this is no exception. And it's anchored by an excellent cast of guys who've done genre work, and they deliver really well on it. Villains are a little bit underdeveloped, but for me, it's difficult not to like it when the film spends most of its time with that group trapped in the VFW itself. So, mate, I think it works a treat, and I gave it 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah,
I hovered near a 4.
Yeah, I'm the same. I was the same. I was very close to a 4, but I ended up at a 3.5 as well. I think what you said is pretty much spot on. Like it doesn't bring anything new to the genre, but it is a movie that same as you. I'm always a fan of this sort of stuff. If you can take those kind of minimal elements and as you said, just somebody in that location trying to get out, and I feel like they've got the necessary motivations here to make it all happen. As you said, they ramp up the gore a little bit. I love seeing those sort of scenes of what have we got that we can use here and how they manage to use them. And they do it all pretty well. Like it's a hell of a good time if this is your sort of movie. And as you mentioned, this is the sort of stuff that I like to watch, and that it's sort of, there's not as much of it anymore. Now it's always, here's a bit of a throwback picture, but fuck, I would love to see more of this sort of stuff. So yeah, I was at 3.5 as well.
Absolutely. Look, immediately out of the blocks on the likes, it opens with the fact that the film is actually presented by Fangoria magazine. This, for me, it seems like a nothing thing, but for me, it brings back a shitload of nostalgia, because I basically read this magazine and bought it monthly from the time I was about 13 till I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s, I think.
Yeah.
I loved the magazine. I always had it. I had hundreds of issues. And so there's a real nostalgia, and to see Fangoria come back, because I believe it disappeared. Is that not correct?
Yeah, it did.
For a little bit, it was shut down, and then now it's reappeared as a sort of like 3 monthly.
Yep.
Issues every 3 months, and it's great to see that it's back, and it's involved in films, and it's involved in something of this level of quality. For me personally, like, it's good to see them being involved in a film that I really enjoyed. So, you know, that was a small like, but it's just really interesting to see that come up.
Yeah,
a lot of time for Fangoria. It sort of shaped my horror movie I guess, life and interest in horror film.
Yeah, well, I was the same by connection to you, basically, because you would buy it.
Yeah, you teased when I said, "Do you want to watch Brain Scared?"
Yeah, exactly.
You were this close to dropping off the horror train when I said, "Oh, Brain Scared's a good film."
Yeah, Brain Scared's all right. What about Shocker? Have you seen Shocker? No, I think, but it was this, every time I'd be over at your place in those sort of years, which was pretty regularly, there'd be issues of Fango laying around. So I'd just fucking pick them up, and I wasn't purchasing them because I knew you already had them. So I'd keep that money in the skyrocket and then go and spend it on shit movies instead. So, but yeah, it's a similar sort of thing. It brings back kind of memories of, those covers and the articles and things like that. And I briefly mentioned it last episode when we brought this up, but I couldn't remember whether it was Fango or Horror Hound, but I knew there was an article that I'd read, and so I went back to the issue, and obviously being a Fango film, it was in Fangoria. They did about 3 pages, I think it was about 3 or 4 pages on this in the last issue that I picked up. So sat down and read that, and yeah, it's just, as you said, it brings us kind of nostalgia, and it's good to see Fangoria kind of back in a form that is I feel like it's better now than when it went away, because it's, as you said, that 3 monthly, it gets a chance to put these big features together, which is really cool to see.
Yeah, it has a little bit more time to actually give you quality product instead of every month they kind of were starting to scratch around for things to go on.
Yeah.
Which, that I think that happens when you're putting out a monthly magazine.
Mm-hmm.
It's no matter what you're putting out.
Yep.
So just, that was a really good start to it. A solid cast of good actors.
Yeah, really good.
It's really good to see some of those guys. I haven't seen William Sadler for donkey's years. Martin Cove. These guys have been sort of off my radar, so to speak.
Mm.
But it's good to see them back. I love Fred Williamson.
Yep.
I've got a lot of time for Fred Williamson. I mean, every time I see him, all I can think of is, you got something to say to them? You say it to me first, his Dusk Till Dawn character.
Yep.
And he kind of just sort of plays a similar style.
Yeah, well, when you look at it, a lot of these guys
stuff
have done this kind of thing before. Like Sadler was in Demon Knight, Dusk Till Dawn for Fred Williamson. You got David Patrick Kelly, who was, although it's not one like...
Crow?
Well, he was in The Crow, but he was also in The Warriors. He was not one of the good guys. He was kind of the head villain in the end. But The Warriors is a similar thing. They're not in one location, but they've got to fight their way from one part of New York to another. It's got that kind of DNA from all these actors. So to put them together in one of these films was really cool. I think it's one of those things where you see it, and the people that are familiar with some of that genre stuff are just kind of nodding their head, thinking, "Yeah, these are the guys we kind of want to see." Like, it's fun to see them all in this scenario together.
And look, it was when Luke brought this up to us on Instagram, his comment was worth looking at just for the cast, and so I quickly checked out the cast, because he'd actually mentioned the director in some previous posts. We had some back and forth, and he'd sort of mentioned this director before, and he mentioned this one. I couldn't find it because it hadn't yet been put on iTunes, I don't believe. And then the other day he brought it back up, and he said the cast, worth having a look at the cast. And I had a quick look, and I was like, I like all these guys, and I'd like to see what this is about. Where does it fit? And I'm a big fan of Stephen Lang. He has a really commanding presence.
Yep.
And it works perfectly for the idea of him being the platoon sergeant to all these guys back in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And so and then it sort of manifests. He becomes a leader again in this situation, and he does it really, really well. And I think the cast in general is top of the line across the board.
Obviously, we mentioned that they have ties to the genre stuff, but it's similar to what we were talking about with Machete. Like, they're reliable guys. Stephen Lang is a very good actor. David Patrick Kelly's a guy who's always pretty reliable. Same with William Sadler. Like, these guys are solid actors. So you're getting them to do the job. And then you get someone like Fred Williamson, who is just dripping with Karasama, mate. He's just he's just awesome to see on screen. Like every time he's talking a bit of back and forth with someone, he just oozes that charm. And so, like you said, you love seeing those guys on the screen, but they're going to do the job for you. They're not going to let you down in that. Like Stephen Lang he fits this role perfectly because, as you're saying, he's got that kind of presence. He seems like a guy with this sort of background.
Yeah, and for me, if you're working with a small budget, which I'm sure I'm not saying this was minuscule budget, but this would have been smaller budget, you get guys like this and it puts your film up a notch, right? Because you're working with guys who understand how to do this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you don't really have to direct them as closely. And speaking of direction, I actually think the direction's pretty good. He does a really good job of creating an atmosphere and a tone. He does some really cool shots, one in particular involving from behind a handgun.
Yeah.
Where the guy they call Deadeye shoots 5 guys in a row.
Yep.
Really cool shot. The action scenes are directed with, a bit of style and a bit of excitement, like there's something happening and it's really well done. So I think from a directorial standpoint, I kind of really like what this bloke brings to the table, and I'd actually like to have a look at his previous films. He's got another couple that I believe are both on iTunes, so it might be worth having a quick look at them.
Yeah, well, I'd heard of Bliss, but I haven't watched it yet. But yeah, after checking this one out, I'll definitely be looking at that one. I'd agree. I think he does a pretty good job of working with what's clearly a kind of small scale, but not really showing it. Like the gang, you don't get too many things that show you, they don't have a lot of people to work with. He shoots it in sort of the confined space really well, that the gang does seem like they have overwhelming numbers, and it never kind of shows off that it probably doesn't have that much money to spend.
Well, they give you that nice shot when you see Lizard running towards the VFW with the bag, and you can see a decent group behind her.
Yeah.
But that's kind of it. It's not like there's 200 people.
No.
So they do a job of just sort of showcasing that there's a good 20 people. Oh, it looks pretty decent size. And then they shoot in the confines of the VFW, so you never sort of think to yourself, well, where are the others? Where are the other 100 that we thought we saw?
Yeah, that's right. So because they're in the confines of the VFW, it does seem like there's just, numbers that continue to stream through, because you just, as you said, you get those couple of scenes where people are busting in and then you get a break from it, but you never really get much of outside other than the main villains sort of standing together out the front. So, I felt like he did a pretty good job of not kind of trying to show too much there, and then by extension accidentally showing us that your group of people is actually pretty small because we couldn't afford a hell of a lot.
And so it works to sort of keep that tension that you can't just leave.
Yeah.
So I think that works well. The FX, rock solid.
Yeah.
I think they do pretty well practically. It's quite gory, quite a bit of heavy-duty axe work and a few other things.
Yeah.
And I think all of that's pulled off pretty well.
Yeah, it's all pretty good.
Yeah, a lot of axe work, Christ.
It's all pretty good. Like there's a lot of sequences where they've got to use those what seems mostly practical stuff. There's a lot of sequences where it's on full display and it holds up pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. The music, I really like the music. I mean, it's a love letter to John Carpenter.
Yeah,
and it's classic sort of synth 80s.
Yeah, simple repetitive stuff.
Yeah. And look, nobody's going to say, "Oh, look, it's super complex," but it works again to build that tension. Very much like something like, say, The Thing, for instance, which just has that throbbing sort of beat.
I feel like
and it builds that tension.
It's one of those elements of the movie where you can see it's clearly taken from somewhere else, but they do a good enough job that you're not sitting there going, "Oh, Jesus," they've just ripped this off and just screwed it up completely. They've actually kind of, made a score that you're okay with.
Yeah, totally agree. And in fact, the music at the opening and the sort of the scroll, the information they put up on the screen, reminded me very reminiscent of something like Escape from New York.
Yeah, definitely.
The start of Escape from New York has that.
Yep.
And so I liked that. It kind of felt like a little homage, and it was another cool way to kick the film off, give us a little bit of info about the drugs and all that sort of stuff, and the fact that it's kind of become a sort of an epidemic, and it was kind of like something like ice or whatever.
Yeah.
And I actually thought there was quite a good scene where he throws the drugs off the second floor balcony or whatever and says to the girl, go get it. And she's so hopped up and so desperate for drugs, she dives after it, basically.
Yeah.
And so I like that because it just quickly and succinctly set the scene that this stuff, how addictive this stuff is and how desperate these people are to get it. Hence why they'll stop at nothing to get into the VFW later. So I kind of like that, just a nice little touch.
I thought that was also set up pretty nicely. Like, we only had a couple of minutes with them, but we got all the info that we needed, and then, the next 20-odd minutes or so is just the guys in the VFW, really. Other than sort of cutting back to them very briefly to see Lizard taking the drugs and setting things in motion. But I really liked this setup with the guys inside the VFW because it was sort of...
Yeah.
They're talking a bit of shit back and forth, but it sort of sets up what you need. It sets up that Lang is the guy that's kind of running the show. He's looking after the VFW, so you get the sense that, he's the guy that sort of takes charge of things when they need to be done. You get the sense that Martin Coe's character has kind of moved on a bit better. And that comes back sort of later on in the way that he reacts when it starts up again, that he doesn't want a bar of it. Whereas the other guys seem to have never really left it. Yeah, I felt all that back and forth in there was quite good to show off the kind of chemistry that these guys had. I felt like Sadler and Lang were pretty good together, especially. But the group as a whole was kind of cool to see them sort of riffing off each other and talking a bit of shit. And
the banter worked. It was natural. It felt real, and I think that's important. Because you needed to get these guys together and see that they were a close group who had been through hell previously.
Yeah.
And so when the shit hits the fan, they will adapt to what they had previously done. And I like the idea that Martin Cove wasn't quite comfortable with that. He kind of does come back to it briefly, but he never quite gets to where the other guys are quick to pick up a weapon and get involved.
Yeah.
Cove kind of steps back, and I kind of like that. I thought it was a nice little wrinkle to otherwise, character development was not high here, but you really didn't have to. You just needed to give us a little piece about everyone, and then it was going to cut loose. The whole shebang was going to go off, and I think that they did a really good job.
Yeah, I liked how it introduced Deadeye as well, like the way he just sort of wanders into the bar and then it allows them to give us a little more kind of talk about their own backgrounds by telling him about it. And you get a couple of funny moments in there. I mean, the chemistry is there throughout. I mean, I love the moment when they say what was it? They're saying something about, Stephen Lang says, we'll make our stand. And Sadler goes, remember the Alamo? And Fred Williams fucking takes the drink.
They all died at the Alamo.
They all died at the Alamo. And then David Patrick Kelly, who's on his fucking deathbed and hasn't had a line in a while, pops up and goes, oh, you dumb shit. That stuff was all good. I really liked that.
Yeah.
As I said, it felt sort of natural, a bit of back and forth. So.
Yeah, agreed. I also like the fact that just coming back to the whole drug thing and how it's quite addictive and people do whatever it takes. I also like the fact that the villain kind of calls out over the PA, the drugs are missing, you track her down. It kind of puts everything in motion, and once again it puts these addicted people with like a kind of a goal. Must catch up with Lizard, must get these drugs.
Yeah, and it was, I mean, that stuff, again, it's one of those things that always just seems to work. I mean, I think we saw that in the Raid, didn't we? We definitely saw it in Dread when Mama gets.
Well, it's funny. I remember seeing it also in it was at SWAT, the movie SWAT, where the guy sort of says, "Oh, $1 million or $100 million to anyone who'll break me out," and so all these gangs and shit come out of the woodwork. So the same thing applies here, and it works because once again we're saying these guys will stop at nothing.
Well, that's right.
And they're kind of so hopped up on this shit they can't look at it and go, someone's coming out with me with an axe, I better just leave.
Well, that's right. They established that, with the, as you said, it was pretty simple. The girl jumping off the ledge, it's like they'd established that these guys are absolutely desperate to to get it.
Yeah.
So they will do what this guy's called out, to put the call out to do. So
Once Lizard hits the VFW, just everything just goes up a notch.
right, immediately.
It is just odd. These blokes are getting chopped and hacked and shot. We get the head stomp by William Sadler, and there's another one where a bloke is part way in the door.
Yep.
And Lang's just going to town with an axe.
Yeah. Well, they have the
so he can close the door.
I mean, almost immediately, David Patrick Kelly's character, I can't remember their names, but he gets hit straight away. And it sort of shocked me a little bit because I was like, I knew this was going to happen, but he gets a good one immediately as soon as it all starts going on, and I thought, oh shit, is he gone already? Then obviously, he
kind of element of surprise sort of thing.
Yeah, and then as you said, Sadler goes in. Then Stephen Lang proceeds to shoot that bloke, and the guy essentially just fucking blows up on the spot. It's just. It's a matter of minutes before we're stamping heads and cutting arms off, and it was just on.
Yeah, I loved it. I really actually enjoyed the scene where Stephen Lang goes to the truck, and he gets the girl is in the female villain is in the back, and grabs him around the neck.
Yep.
And he uses the keys to stab her, and then he gets out of the car, and as he turns around. There's a bloke coming straight at him with a machete.
Mm.
And then Sadler bails him out with a shotgun. I thought that stuff was really well. It was tight. It was exciting. It was tense. It was all going really, really well. And I think from a directorial standpoint, it's one of the reasons I think why the film works is because it's really strongly directed in those sequences. So it kind of wrings every morsel out of it.
Yeah, I thought those sequences were quite solid. The tension was there. You knew these guys were around. You knew it was going to hit at some point, but you didn't necessarily know exactly where it was going to hit. But yeah, I was like you. The scenes didn't necessarily bring anything new to the table, but they were directed in a nifty kind of stylish sort of fashion, so they were really enjoyable all the way through.
Yeah, and the film kind of builds here. We get several attempts to kind of bust their way in, and it is just on. I mean, one bloke gets impaled on some antlers.
Yeah. Yes.
He gets impaled on some antlers, kind of Silent Night, Deadly Night style. Stephen Lang goes to town with an axe and takes about 3 heads off.
Yeah. I think this is what I like about these movies sometimes. I like the creativity of what do we got here and what would realistically be in this location. And for the most part, these guys have got what you would expect them to have. There was a few things I was looking at going, shit, where'd that come from? But most of it, like the stuff hanging on the walls and using the billiard table, using the stools to fucking knock the legs off and sharpen them up and things like that. Like I enjoy it when they actually go to the lengths to say, all right, what would you be able to turn into a weapon in this place?
And they use the beer kegs with the spikes through it
Yeah.
that swing down and take that dude out.
Yep.
I mean, it's very, I appreciate the time and effort put into finding something that they can use rather than, I just happened to find a machine gun in the back or something like that.
Yep.
So I appreciated that, and I think they did a really good job with it. And that period is just sustained with half a dozen attempts to get in. That big dude comes in and they all take him on and they all fail. And then Lizard just leaps on his back and just starts stabbing him in the throat over and over. And then Deadeye just comes up and knees him in the head so many times his head just basically ends up like mush.
Yeah. Yeah, that was pretty full on, that one.
I loved it.
Yeah.
It was over the top, but in the right possible way. And we talked about this when we did Machete, the same thing. You accepted that it was over the top and you dealt with it. And I think that that's part of what makes this film enjoyable as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you put it nicely there. It's over the top in the right ways. It's the ways that you kind of want it to be over the top is where it hits the marks. I think, and I'm not saying that the film is terribly realistic, but I like the way that they set up the world. And it's the same as what you were saying about how they set up the drug and how people would do this. I like the way that they set up the world where this would happen with no outside interference going on. And, you know, there's a couple of throwaway lines like Sadler saying, cavalry ain't coming. This in this neighbourhood, gunshots are like crickets. And you know, placing this in a world where this could actually happen. I mean, the gang... A couple of times I was looking at it and I'm saying there are a couple of, you know, more outlandish costume and colour choices away from being the Mad Gear Gang in Final Fight or something like that, you know? Like, yeah. Which was what I sort of liked. I like ideas like that in movies like The Warriors where it's a little bit kind of outlandish, but they're exciting. They ramp up the excitement levels and they use those gangs and the sort of over-the-top nature of them to ramp up the sort of excitement a little bit.
Yeah, agreed. I kind of liked Lou's death. It felt a little generic that Lou tries to do the whole, I'll negotiate.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'll negotiate. I'll go out there. And then, you know, he calms down and then he slips out the back door before anyone can stop him. And, you know, he goes and he tries to negotiate. It doesn't work. And I thought for a second they were going to just go real generic by just shooting him. Yeah. But then he finds a bit of fire and he kind of ends it by having a big blue with him and belting a few blokes before he gets shot.
Yeah. Well, I
kind of like that.
Well, I thought exactly the same. I thought we knew sort of it felt like this was where it was going to go. And then when he did it, I was the same as you. I was thinking, yeah, it's a little bit cliched. But I'll tell you the part that I loved is that, as you said, he goes out with a bit of pepper and belts a few blokes on the way out. But the fact that after that happens, they go back inside and David Patrick Kelly's character has gone too.
Yes.
You know, he goes too, and it's like, well, that was kind of the catalyst for trying to ramp up getting out of here, was to get him to a hospital or whatever. So when Lou does that, and then you get that fucking extra kick that it didn't matter anyway. It's just like, oh, fuck, there was actually a bit of a sting to it.
Yeah, and that's when they decide to just hunker down. And I love that little monologue he says to the bloke when they come face to face.
Yeah, that was cool.
He says, if you're going to come, you need to come hard, because if you make a mistake, I'll cut your heart out.
Yeah, that was cool.
And I thought that was great. Like, and he just holds the axe up in front of the hole.
Yeah.
As if to say, you know what I'm talking about. And I thought that was really, really a good way to sort of lead into the finale, which is just fucking bonkers. Just an orgy of violence.
Yeah, it's everything.
Fred Williamson snorting bloody hype prior to get...
Well, that was again, when that happened, I was expecting that at some point, but for him to do it and you know how it all takes place, you still look at it as we were saying before. You look at Fred Williamson doing it, and then he starts kind of, you know, a little bit of twitching and steps out there, and he's like, he got a bit of a come on, like you just like
he gives us the old hand gesture. Come on,
and he gives a little point, like he sort of. I can't remember what someone does, but he gives like a little 2-finger point, and you're like, yeah, it had to be him. Definitely had to be him to be doing that. And it's again another thing that you were sort of expecting to happen. Another box that once they had their hands on the drugs, you were thinking that was a possibility that this might come up, that one of them would do that. But you still loved every minute of it because it was Fred Williamson doing it, and it was him in his classic kind of style. So.
Yeah, and agreed. Cool. You kind of had to hit that mark. You had to hit it.
Yeah.
Because you had him there, you had to kind of to find that point. And I think that they brought it up at the perfect time, just prior to everything kicking off. And, you know, the finale is as good as the lead up. It comes right to the point of, you know, it's super over the top, but enjoyable as hell. You know, I really enjoyed that last 20 minutes. I thought they kind of really ramped it and rammed it home.
Yeah, I had a blast with that. I thought it was really good.
Yeah, and my final like was the toast at the end. I just felt it was such a nice way to finish, and that sounds strange, but the fact that we'd kind of started with, you know, having shots and you know, toasting to us as soldiers and all that sort of stuff, those guys are soldiers and everything like that.
And getting one more little gag out of Fred Williamson.
Yeah. And it just perfectly encapsulated, and it was kind of like also a final sort of toast to the two guys who died, or the three guys that had died. as part of their platoon, and I thought that was a really, really good way to finish.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I actually felt the way that they dealt with the head honcho too was pretty solid. The call back to the zip lighter and the fucking big truck ramming into him and that sort of shit. Like that was super satisfying the way that all went down. So yeah, I thought it was pretty deftly handled.
Yeah, for the most part there was limited issues for me. Do you have any other likes that you wanted to bring up?
No, that was pretty much it.
As far as issues are concerned, I felt the villains were undercut, probably more so from a perspective of time on screen. They're not really in it greatly.
Yeah, a little
which
bit.
is good because we spend more time with the crew, which works.
Yep.
The main villain's probably the weakest link in the acting department too.
Well, I felt like he needed to be like a little more over the top, or if you were going to go with the direction that they went with, it had to be an actor that had a similar sort of gravitas to Lang to ramp up the kind of the threat, because he just wasn't quite. Now, I don't think that the guy was necessarily a bad actor, but I just felt like for the role we needed someone who was going to be either like a massive sort of unit, more physically threatening, or if he was going to be kind of how this guy looked, which I was okay with, he needed to have a bit more presence.
Yeah. I look at something like Green Room, for instance. You got someone like Patrick Stewart who's playing a very he's not over the top, but there's a ton of menace to that.
Yeah.
And it's the way it's done.
Yeah.
And he's quiet but menacing. This guy's trying to be menacing, and in fact his female offside is probably more menacing.
Yeah,
she's more successful.
I thought she was
menacing.
The better character, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and I actually felt she might have been better suited to being the villain, just because she had a bit more. I felt more presence, and maybe it was just because she doesn't speak as much, and she was a big machete wielder, which is always useful. But yeah, I just felt the villains kind of get undercut. But it's not really a massive issue because you want to spend time with these guys. You don't really want to spend that much time with the villains.
No. But I felt it would have just helped to put it over the top a little bit by having someone that was just a bit, as you said, the menace, the level of menace that he kind of displays just isn't quite there. Like it's hard to imagine,
and especially
someone like that big unit being bossed around by him. Whereas if it was someone with a bit more of that level of menace, then you can cop that.
Yeah, and it's very heavily apparent when him and Lang come face to face.
Yes. Because
Lang's such a commanding actor, it just feels like a mismatch.
Yeah, it does.
Which it shouldn't. It should be hero and villain kind of on the same footing. But I don't want to shit all over it because I didn't think it was the worst villain in horror films, but I just felt it didn't kind of stand up to who they were up against.
It wasn't bad. It wasn't bad by any stretch, but it was just that it'd probably go down as a little bit sort of, forgettable in that sense, I guess.
That's probably the right word, I'd say. The film's a bit murky at times. It's a style thing. It's shot in a certain way using some underlit sections of the film. There's some stuff in the drug house early on that's lit by like a red light. Mm-hmm. And there are times when you can't see things very well.
Yep.
Only brief times, and in fact, once it really starts to tee off, the lighting gets right, and it's fine. But there are just some times where it's a little murky, and I found that a couple of times I was like, "What just happened there?"
Yeah,
couldn't quite see it. That again, it's a stylistic choice, and I think for the most part, the stylistic side of what they were doing worked. But just a couple of times, it just felt like scenes weren't lit properly, and I couldn't see what was going on.
Mm.
So I kind of was, what happened there? A little bit confused. So, again, not a huge issue, but just a couple of times I just felt that they missed with how it was lit.
Yeah, well, I actually did. There was a couple of times where I used the rewind 15 seconds button on the iPad when I was watching it because of that sort of thing. As you said, for the most part, I felt like it worked, that stylistic choice. But there was a couple of sequences where there was similar looking people, and I was like, "Hang on a second, did I just see what I think I saw?" And then I would go back and I was like, no, it's a different person. And I think that comes down to what you were saying. It was a couple of times it did get a little bit difficult to kind of follow what had actually just gone on.
Yeah. Because, look, I mean, it was obvious what they were trying to do. They were trying to sort of showcase the whole idea of, the power cuts out, it's at night, they're trying to sort of create that atmosphere, and I appreciated that, and I think they did a very good job with that. But it just a few times I just felt it was just too far.
Yeah.
Too far into the darkness, so I couldn't tell what was happening.
Yep.
My only other issue, it just seemed, the whole thing that kicked the plot off with Lizard stealing the drugs just seemed way too convenient.
It was a little bit easy for her.
You're running a drug operation, you're leaving your you're putting a ton of drugs in there that are worth a heap.
Yeah.
And you put them in the safe and you're leaving the safe open.
Yeah, everyone leaves the room and the safe hanging open.
Yeah. And she just sort of waltzes in and just grabs the stuff and pisses off. It just felt a little bit convenient. Perhaps not enough effort put into getting that to happen.
Yeah.
So it felt real.
Yep.
It just kind of felt very generic. In a way, I understand it as kind of like, let's cut the shit and get to the VFW so we can start this off.
Yeah.
So we want to get to it quickly.
Yep.
But it just felt a little bit, it lacked of realism.
Yeah.
And I shouldn't, it's strange saying that in a movie where people get their heads bloody kneed into oblivion.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I would agree. Like, I actually quite liked the way that it ramped things up by saying, she went into the VFW because and took the drugs because her sister was the one that jumped off the building. Yes. But then I liked the little kicker that was the guy's brother that got fucking blown into oblivion with old mate's head.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like that part. But you're right, it was a little bit too easy. A little bit too easy for how it all happened. Even just another minute.
It unfolded
would have only taken
too cleanly.
Yeah, another minute or so of screen time to kind of develop something a little bit neater. Similarly, along those lines, my last dislike was the way George goes out. Like, you looked at the cast, and I was sitting there picking who I thought was going to go early, and he was right up there. He was right up on the candidates.
Oh yeah, because he's barely in it.
Yeah, but
I expected him to cark it from liver failure.
Yeah, well, that's as I suggested to you, he was in it so briefly that I think perhaps his pay was actually the beers they were serving him at the bar there. He just turned up for a couple of quiet schooners and then fucking off he went. But the way that he goes out was just really silly. And as you said, it sounds funny to say something like this in a movie of this kind of nature, but I mean, Jesus, even the most stubborn bastard wouldn't walk out after someone's been blown up and there's already a fucking arm laying on the floor of the VFW, I believe, by that point. So even the most stubborn prick wouldn't just kind of wander out there and say, "Oh yeah, I'm just going to get the car." Come on, you silly bastard. That's not.
It almost felt like they needed to get rid of him quick.
Yeah, it seemed like it seemed like one of those scenes where they were trying to establish that the threat was there. Even though they weren't banging the doors down, you weren't safe to head outside. But it just seemed like, again, just too easy. He just fucking wanders out.
Yeah, he wanders out and just gets nailed in 2 seconds, and it kind of just felt anticlimactic too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everyone else earned their deaths, like all the other guys in the VFW who died went out on, fighting and kicking and screaming.
Yeah.
And George just kind of goes out like a wet fart. He just kind of walks.
He just himself out. Barely even noticed.
Makes a heap of noise. leaves some things behind.
Yeah, and you finish up thinking, well, that was fucking unpleasant, wasn't it? Jesus.
You giggle and then you go, ooh. Too much.
Yeah, I think you kind of put it well there, like saying that everyone else sort of went out in a fashion that you were kind of expecting people to go out in, whereas his was just thrown to the wolves basically. Like you knew what was going to happen the second he kind of just strolled out there. Like there was no surprise to it. So yeah, that was a slight disappointment when everyone else sort of was handled pretty well.
Yeah, great. Have you got anything else, mate?
No, that was all of it.
All right. That's VFW. Again, big thanks to Luke for putting this one on our radar. I've heard from him a few times. He's given me a few little tips and films to watch, and he's pretty much on the money most of the time. So thanks again, Luke. We really appreciate you getting in touch with us and putting us onto this one.
Yeah, maybe we should be listening to him instead of you. Next time you suggest Brain Scan, I might say no.
Next week, Brain Scan. Yeah, fuck you. All right, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, and Podomatic. Send us an email at thrillme@ionet.net.au. We're on Facebook at Thrill Me Podcast Australia, Podomatic at thrillme.podomatic.com, and Instagram at thrillmepodcast.au. Please rate and review. You're doing nothing else. I've reiterated it last time. You're sitting on your date. You just get on there, rate and review. I don't care if it's giving us a gobful for our shit performance.
Yeah.
Keep an eye on the Facebook page.
We take critical feedback, mate.
Yeah, I think we can.
We probably need it.
Yeah, exactly. Keep an eye on our Facebook page for details of the next episode. But until then, take it easy, take care of yourself, and we'll catch up with everyone later. Cheers. Find the podcast at Podomatic or on iTunes. Don't forget to rate and review. Like us on Facebook at Thrill Me Podcast Australia, or contact us at thrillme, all one word, all lowercase, at ionet.net.au.